Our featured speaker today is Erin Gruwell, a UCI alum in English from 1991. She has earned a national award-winning reputation for her steadfast commitment to the future of education. As a teacher at Long Beach's Wilson High School, she believed in her English students, most of whom had been written off by other teachers or administrators, but she saw their passion. She taught them to write for their lives, and that's basically, I should say, is a dirty little secret of us humanities professors, because we write for our lives. Now, she encouraged them to address issues of social inequality, of racism, to address their deepest struggles, and ultimately to rechart their futures. With her support, they became published writers, college students, and have gone on for a variety of careers for themselves. Their story earned them dozens of awards, including the Spirit of Anne Frank Award. And many of you remember, in January of 2007, Paramount Pictures released the feature film Freedom Writers to national acclaim, starring Hilary Swank as Erin Gruwell. Now, after the Freedom Writers graduated from Wilson High in 1998, Erin traded in her high school classroom for Cal State Long Beach, where she became a teacher in residence in the College of Education. Her goal was to motivate as many students as possible by reaching as many teachers as possible. Today, her impact as a teacher well extends beyond the classroom with her Freedom Writers Foundation, where she currently teaches educators from across the country to implement her innovative lesson plans in their own classrooms. We are honored to have her with us today. Please join me in welcoming fellow Anteater, Erin Gruwell.
Thank you. Thank you. 21 years ago today, on Father's Day, I sat where you're sitting today, nervous and excited and passionate. And it reminds me of a scene in The Wizard of Oz when Dorothy is going down that yellow brick road. She finally makes it to the shiny city of Oz, pulls back the curtain, and there's this guy with a bad haircut pulling strings. He's not a wizard. He doesn't have pixie dust or magic. And suddenly she's disappointed. And I felt like that today as I walked onto campus. I saw this young boy, probably here for one of you graduates. He looked at me, this young graduate to be, he said, "Can I take a picture of you?" And this little boy looked me up and down and said, "You look a lot older than that woman in the movie." So it was a very demoralizing moment when I realized that he too had just pulled back the curtain, saw somebody with a bad haircut pulling the strings. As I sat in those seats 21 years ago, anxious and excited, I actually thought I was going to go off and become a lawyer, God forbid. And then one day, something happened. I remember turning on my television when I was an undergrad, and there was this young boy in the middle of Tiananmen Square, a young boy standing in front of a tank. And he was standing up for something that was so much bigger than himself, whether it was democracy or freedom or the simple right to want to get an education. And I was steadfast. I watched this young boy stand in front of that tank as if to say, "Bring it on." And up until that moment, I realized I'd never really stood up for anything. When I reflected upon graduation about that young boy in Tiananmen Square standing in front of a tank, at that moment I realized I wanted to stand up for something. And it may not be in a courtroom with a judge and a jury, but I wanted to stand up for kids. Because a year after I graduated, in 1992, we had the Los Angeles riots. And I remember watching young boys who were so angry, who didn't have a voice, who had felt invisible, who had been on the fringes of our society. And in that anger, they picked up Molotov cocktails and threw them at buildings. And so at that moment, I realized I wanted to stand up for those kids, to give a voice to the voiceless, to give hope to those that had no hope. So when I called my father and told him that I no longer was going to pursue my law degree, he didn't take the news so well. He quickly reminded me that teachers don't make any money, which is true. He also told me that I would never afford a home in Newport Beach, which is actually still true to this day. But no matter how cynical my father was about my new chosen profession and my new economic stature, I thought, I'm going to show my dad it's not about money. It's that aha moment when that invisible light bulb goes on and someone gets it. I knew nothing about being a teacher. And when I walked into the classroom in Long Beach, California, shortly after the riots, I walked into a classroom where my students had buried friends and family members in their community. In fact, there was 126 murders in Long Beach alone. So at the age of 14, my students knew what it felt like to walk through life with a bullseye on their chest, to look over their shoulder, to wonder and wish, am I going to make it home alive, to kiss that hardworking single mom goodnight every single night. I walked into a classroom with students at the age of 14 who hated reading, they hated writing, they hated each other, and the only thing that seemed to bring them together in perfect harmony was they really hated me, this annoying, perky cheerleader from hell wearing polka dots and pearls, because I thought that I was going to resemble Julia Roberts in the film Pretty Woman, and I wore the exact same dress. My students looked at me with these white polka dots and these white pearls and this perceived white privilege and thought there's no way in the world that this annoying cheerleader from hell, this anteater, is going to survive a day, a week, or a month. And that is where our journey began, our yellow brick road. We didn't have lions and tigers and bears, oh my, but we had discrimination, we had stereotypes, and little by little, each and every one of my students had to learn how to put down that fist, put down that spray can, put down that gun, and pick up a pen. And maybe, just maybe, each and every one of my 150 students could use that pen to be mightier than the sword. Maybe they couldn't change the cast of characters they were dealt, but maybe they could rewrite their own ending. So I started reflecting on every single lesson, every single story I'd read here at UCI. And I wanted my students to find themselves somehow, some way within the pages of a book, not to go and get cliff notes, not to go on the internet and download somebody else's paper, not to rent a movie, but to find themselves within literature. Because on that syllabus, on that first day when I passed it out to my disgruntled students, it came back at me in the form of a paper airplane with a young boy in the back row saying, "Why do we have to read books written by dead white guys in tights?" Which is a very profound question. Because on that syllabus were stories written by dead white guys who wore tights or togas 400 years ago or 2,000 years ago from countries my students couldn't even identify on a map. I stand before you taking 150 students who weren't supposed to make it through their freshman year in high school. They were supposed to drop out, who thought they would be behind bars by the time they turned 16. And worse yet, most of them thought they would be 6 feet under by the time they turned 18. And through the power of the pen and through storytelling and realizing that sometimes the journey in and of itself is the destination, I watched 150 kids become the first in their family to graduate, the first in their families to go to college. And just like your illustrious speaker today, Amber, all of my students were the first in their families to graduate. And now they're going off to get master's degrees and PhDs. And my toughest student, she now thinks she's going to be the first Latina Secretary of Education. And she told that to members of Congress. And when we walked into the halls of Congress, she looked around in Washington, D.C., and she said, "Oh my God, Miss G, there's so many old white men in here." And there are. But without skipping a beat, my little Maria Reyes walked in like she was J-Lo with 5-inch stilettos, like she owned the joint. She looked around at all these members with power and positions of authority, whisked her hair back very dramatically, and then she simply said, "You know, gentlemen, I am going to be the first Latina Secretary of Education." And she snapped. I'm surprised the Secret Service didn't throw her out of the joint, because when that little girl walked into my classroom years earlier, at the age of 14, she walked into my classroom not with a shiny red apple, not with books and aspirations of going off to college, but she walked into my classroom with an ankle monitor around her leg, a probation officer, and a rap sheet. And here she was in the most powerful place in our country, declaring that she was going to run the joint, she was going to live on Pennsylvania Avenue. So I look out at all of you students, whether you're English majors or creative writing majors, philosophy, or any kind of the humanities that go through the halls of UC Irvine, realizing that the journey lies ahead, that each and every one of you get to rewrite your own ending. And some of you knew from the womb what you were going to do, and some of you are sitting there right now thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do starting tomorrow? I was that person. Oh my God, what am I going to do starting tomorrow? I'm still that person standing in front of you with that imposter complex when somebody turns back the curtain, because I was a very ordinary person who had an extraordinary experience. And I'd like to believe that extraordinary experience began right here at UCI. So it is an honor, it is a privilege to be a part of this journey with you. And wherever it may take us, I want to be a part of it. Thank you and congratulations.